passionate about staff wellness. Mr. Bueller, would you mind introducing yourself first?
Thank you, Jessica. I had to unmute myself. Hi, my name is Art Bueller, and I'm thrilled to be part of today's presentation on morale, wellness, getting buy-in, all those kinds of things that are so critical for a warden in this day and time. I mean, we are all facing the great resignation and the gray tsunami where people are leaving the moment they are eligible for retirement. And we have lots of people who are leaving us, and it even makes the job that we're doing much more important than what we've done in the past, I think. I have invited a person by the name of Emery Morton to give us a few comments from his perspective. He lives this stuff. I thought I lived it. I don't live it at all compared to Embry. So I will just give him the floor whenever it is time to do that, Jessica. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course. Yeah. And Mr. Morton, please feel free to chime in at any time. In fact, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself right now, since I know we're going to be hearing from you soon. Why don't you give us an introduction?
Well, my name is Warden Emery Morton. I've been in the business for 25 years. I spent 18 years at medium custody, and in 2015, I took over a medium custody prison. I believe leading staff with a philosophy of love and changing the culture of our leadership. A warden is just a title, but a difference maker is what we need to be, and be visionaries. And we can talk about that more when we get into it. But I can tell you right now, for the state of North Carolina, I'm the only prison that has no vacancies. And the proof's in the pudding. When you treat people like people and not tools, and you show them you love them, and you tell them you love them, and you appreciate them, I got to beat them away from the door. I can't hire no more. So that's my philosophy. I believe in leading with love and leading people, not tools. And it makes a difference.
Wow, 0 vacancies. I'm sure there are some folks that are here that want to know what's in that sauce. So we're looking forward to hearing from you. Mr. Capra, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. How's everybody doing today? I'm Michael Capra. I am superintendent of State City Correctional Facility here in the great state of New York. I've been in business for the last 41 years. In the last 10, I have been superintendent here at Sing Sing. It's been a great ride these many years. I think we all have a lot to share. We all have a lot of great ideas about how, about retention, about leadership. I think it's all under this umbrella of leadership, positive role models, positive leadership. I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody involved. I think we could all learn from, even though I might be one of the older guys in the crowd. I'm always looking to hear other people's perspectives and ideas and learn from everyone. I think we all need to be students of human beings, whether we are leading a group of employees or we are managing a group of incarcerated people. We all are students, really, and when we put our best foot forward in a positive way and change the culture to really lower recidivism, I think that's our litmus test, right? At the end of the day, how successful are we when we have 1,700 broken pieces? Are we able to put them back together again, so when they leave me, they don't come back and see me again? And I think that's what we're all about. I think, and how we do that, each one of us, I think, has a story. So I'm looking forward to today, and it's great to hear from everyone.
Great, thank you. And my name is Jessica Sedano-Seipel. I'm a senior program director with Just Detention International. So happy to be here and to host this conversation. The backbone of our Great Wardens Project is our task force. We have some members that are here with us now, some who couldn't be, because I'm sure you all know the work is really busy. It's every day. I do want to highlight some of our new members, of which Mr. Bueller is one. If anyone is on this call and is interested in learning more about the task force and potentially becoming part of the task force, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information will be at the end of this presentation. And so today's summit is not really a training. And for those of you that were in our last summit, this may be kind of familiar. We cannot purport to have the answers to all of these really big questions, but I do believe that through conversation, through discussion, and through sharing the collective wisdom that's in this sort of virtual room, that we can identify some solutions together. And so today's summit is really a conversation. We will not be lecturing at you and talking at you. There's going to be so many opportunities for folks to participate, whether that's through polls, whether that's through the chat. And as I mentioned, if folks want to actually ask questions or provide suggestions or share their ideas or their experience, please feel free to do so. I really want this space to be for you all to talk with each other and to connect with each other. That's something that I've learned doing this work, and one of the reasons why the Great Wardens Project exists is to provide space for wardens and superintendents to connect with each other. So I hope that folks are able to take advantage of that. One of the reasons why we're talking about this topic at all is because it was identified by you all out in the field as something that you all were really interested in talking more about. I think maybe a year ago or so, a survey was sent out via NAS. It's very possible that some of you filled out that survey. And these were the topics that you all identified were your priorities. Our first and second summits covered the first and second topics, and now we're here at our third one. For anyone who was with us last time, this image looks really familiar. This is really sort of the core of how we at the Great Wardens Project identify the strengths of a good leader, someone who challenges the status quo with new ideas, new ways of thinking, someone who values honesty and integrity, someone who is inspiring, right? That's kind of the thing that we're going to be talking about a lot today, is how to inspire staff to want to come to work, to want to do good work. Someone who's an effective communicator, and of course, someone who creates that vision. Mr. Capra said it himself. The vision is to reduce recidivism, right? That's what the goal is, right? So how do you communicate that vision to folks? How do you get them inspired to be a part of that work? That's really what we're going to be talking about today. But it is, of course, not without its challenges, right? This was also from the survey that was sent out a year ago in terms of whether or not staff morale has an impact on the day-to-day life at the facility. I don't know who that 0.68% of folks who responded that said it had no impact on their facility. Whatever they're doing must be special. Clearly, everyone else understands that staff morale has a huge impact on just the day-to-day operation of facilities. And so that brings me to our first discussion question. And Mr. Beeler, Mr. Capra, and Mr. Morton as well, I want to encourage three of you to begin this discussion. How is staff morale at your facility right now? Good, bad, ugly, everything in between. How has it been for you all as leaders to navigate all the stuff that's happening right now?
Well, I'll go ahead and talk about staff morale at the facility that I work at. All of us are technical leaders in our positions. We wouldn't be where we at today if we were not. But we also need to be emotional leaders, difference makers. Like I said, a warden is just a title. But when I took over that prison, it was demoralized. And I made it a vision, and I made it an impact that staff morale must be at the front line. When staff have high morale, it carries to the back to the offender population. We have to have staff accountable, but I'm gonna tell you what demoralizes staff at any facility. When they are afraid of management, they feel like they're gonna be written up for everything they do. And the way we were trained, most of us in our career, get on the train or get off, or you don't say anything in a meeting. But like this Great Wardens Project, we have to change the culture, like Mr. Capper said. And I'm gonna tell you something. I got a cooler named Morale, and it goes with me when I make rounds and I pass out Gatorades and drinks. We have ice cream day. I put the thing into love, and it's not intimacy, and it's not staff fraternization. It's love, listen, observe, value, and evaluate. staff want to be empowered and feel valued, part of the process. And at Carteret, we are a family. We spend more time with our coworkers than we do with our own family at home. And I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm having to beat them away from the door because I can't hire no more. And the atmosphere at my prison with the morale right now touches my heart. And like Mr. Capper says, it helps my rehabilitation because I'm a reentry facility. So I have dual roles. But I can tell you right now, my staff morale is very high. And I don't allow any manager that works for me, because it don't take but one bad manager to tear your morale down or tear your facility down. If they do, they come up there and see me for special rehabilitation on how to be a lovable leader. And that is key, because if you talk, it's just like Mary Angelou said, people will forget what you said, but will not forget how you said it. And that's what we got to realize, that our staff are not tools, they're people, and we got to treat them like people. And so I'm very passionate. I believe in loving my staff, and not just love them, tell them I love them, show them I love them. So I'm very passionate. So that's about my morale at Carteret.
Thank you. Thank you.
Margaret.
Mr. Beeler, Mr. Capra, anything to add?
Well, I think Emery talked about a whole lot of things there. But I'll let Mike go. Go ahead, Mike. Mike, you there?
Just, I am. I just had this issue with it cutting in and out. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, Art. Go ahead.
You know, the issue about morale, you'll find it different places, different ways. And, you know, I was a warden or partially warden at 10 different facilities in my career. And one thing I told Emery the other day when we were talking is, the larger and the more complex your institution is, the harder it is, but the more important it is. And that's to get out and walk and talk and tell your people that you care about them, tell your people that you're there to help them. It's remarkable how they respond to that. People just want to be heard. People want to be seen. People want to know they have value. And we're talking about value in a situation where we're talking about millennials and Gen Zs and, you know, intergenerational kinds of stuff. And they really want to be valued. You've got to give them opportunities to be valued. It's not all about the money. I don't think any of us will get rich working in corrections. I don't know of anybody who has gotten rich working in corrections. But people want to feel like they're a part of the organization. It's up to us as wardens to make them part of the organizations. And I always say that presence is more than visibility. Presence is making yourself, Emery calls it LOVE. I just call it being pure and caring. And when you're present with a staff member, they know it. And when you're glad having a staff member, they know that too. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I agree. I think we, as you say, a lot of different places, different cultures that different parts of the state, country, you know, folks are a little different, but have a lot of the same similarities when it comes down to, you know, responding to people who care for them, right? So whether it be corrections or any function, you know, we all like to get a pat on the back, no matter how high we are, or how, whether we're line staff or we're all the way up to superintendent or warden, or even the commissioner. You know, it's nice to have somebody give some accolades for the hard work you've done. And I think we've all kind of learned that throughout the year. You know, one of my techniques, everybody has different techniques. You know, I run a good sized facility, and we have almost 1,000 people here. staff-wise rather, and a little less than that. But you know, a lot of people say, well, everybody's quick to get put on paper. Well, we do a lot of acknowledgement from my office on staff that do a great job. So it may not raise to the level of an accommodation, but a letter of appreciation goes a long way. And I kind of keep track of that quarterly. I make sure that they know. And I think the other superintendents, wardens, and other people that are in this chat right now, we all have, you know, methods that we employ when we go around and we talk to our staff. You know, of course, Mel Williams, he's one of the New York old timers, part of the NAWS now, but he was a superintendent for many, many years. You know, they talk about quality rounds. Well, that was not only for the incarcerated, but for us to deal with our staff. And when we communicate with them, they know sincerity. They know BS from sincerity. So if you're out, you know, walking and talking and communicating with your staff, they'll know from how you are, because of the business that we're in, whether you mean what you say. And for me, it's been, you know, 10 years here at one facility as a superintendent and a maximum security facility. We've had a lot of things happening here. We've had, you know, staff die, incarcerated people die. You know, we've dropped gas in our big yards. We've done a lot of big time correction stuff here. And yeah, I think consistency and caring for people and doing the right thing means a lot to how you lead. If people know that you care and you're always caring and you make decisions with that in mind, even when it comes to discipline, you know, we're part of what our function is to keep the ship, you know, running in the right direction. And that does not come without, you know, some penalty when somebody's doing the wrong thing. And so, you know, those little words of encouragement, or those either accommodations or letters of appreciation, go a long way. And when we have events at times, and once a year, I will get all those people together and then some. I'll have them all stand up, everybody that's received a letter from me. And then I have a superintendent's coin that me and a number of superintendents in New York State put together. And that's really for the, you know, super high achievers. And they'll get a letter of accommodation and a coin from me. And I think that goes a long way. It's not everything. I think there's a combination of many things. I'd like to hear from other people about what they do. But we all have techniques, and I think it's all about the human condition and how we care about each other and make a difference. So I'll say for now, interested to hear from other folks.
Yeah, as am I. Anyone who's here who wants to join in, please feel free to unmute yourself or to enter the chat, and just share with us how things have been at your facility. How is staff morale? How is it good, bad, ugly? What are some of the things that you're doing to try to improve it? Let's see, we've got, oh, thank you, Nick. A message from our own Nicole. So you know, you all are the experts here. None of this is going to be new to you all. But I did want to, you know, just highlight, based on some of the research that I did preparing for this presentation, some of the sort of sources of stress for correctional officers as identified in the research. And we're going to spend some time sort of talking specifically about some of these, particularly role ambiguity, work-life balance, those kinds of things. I'm wondering, as folks are looking at this list here, if there's anything here that stands out to you all. I realize that there are some of these that are inherent to the role, right? There are some of these that you all as leaders can really influence. And I'm wondering if any of these issues have been particular issues at your facilities or among your staff, or if anyone here has made it a point to sort of combat any of these in particular. And I'll give a moment for folks to take a look and share their thoughts.
Jessica, this is a day-to-day issue that we as wardens and staff face every day. But like I said, when I took over morale is a big part of it, but if staff are afraid of management, that's one stressor. They trade that in when they go to the back and work with the offender population, and that's another stressor.
Mm.
As leaders, and my FIOs, Facility Intelligence Officer, I identify the offenders that are trying to intimidate our staff, and I start the motion procedures. I start rehabilitation real quick on that offender. And it took a while because some of us leaders set up in the front and staff can become prey to these offenders that prey on staff and other offenders. So I don't know. I got a rule at Carteret. I don't allow any offender to intimidate my staff. If they do, they get special rehabilitation from me again, and they get all that attention called demotion. The ones that are doing what they're supposed to, like Mr. Capper said, my job is to get them back into society and be successful. But as leaders, we're responsible for that stress, and we can combat. But we're not talking about a spontaneous assault that can occur at any moment with an offender that has anger management problems. I mean, that happens in our environment. But as leaders, if we know that we have offenders targeting our staff, we need to really deal with that. That helps with the fear and aggression, shows them that we support them. Also, when we have multidisciplinary meetings, I invite line staff into it because I'm not God. I don't have all the answers. And sometimes the boots on the ground have input that is very important, that we as leaders put things in black and white, but in reality does not work well in that environment. So stuff like that, we can combat sources of serious stress, but of course it's a violent business that we work in.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm curious too, to what extent others that are here in the room with us sort of combat this stressor regarding input in decision making. I know that, as leaders, some things are cut and dry and things have to be, a certain way. But I wonder if others have any strategies that they use to take opinions or thoughts or suggestions from line staff all the way on up as they're making their policy decisions or practice decisions. Is that something that's come up for anyone else?
Hey, Jess.
Yes.
Yeah, wardens have to be decision makers. A lot of times we want to do the easy stuff that comes to us. Those easy stuff come across your desk and you got a couple really difficult decisions to make. Sometimes you need to put all the easy stuff aside and take on that head burner right away, because that's what staff are waiting for. They don't want to wait for the boss to make a decision or tell us what direction we're going into. Sometimes you got to sit down and make that very tough decision and go forward with it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I saw some nodding heads in the video feed. So it sounds like there are a lot of folks that agree with you on that. Any other thoughts?
Jessica, this is Dawn.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Dawn.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Hello to everybody. I just wanted to put my 2 cents in for the no input and decision making and role ambiguity. That is definitely a morale downer when your folks feel like anything that they do really doesn't contribute, and if they have ideas that they're not taken into consideration. So I think everybody should try to set up some kind of system so that line staff feel like they can give you as the warden input. Now, I did that a couple of ways when I was a warden in my facility. One, I had an open door policy, so anybody could get in, make an appointment, get in, or if I wasn't doing anything, they actually could just walk in. But they always had that ability. I had town hall meetings once a quarter where myself and my management staff would go out and have 3 different sessions. So each shift could come in and we would talk about what was going to happen during that quarter and any input into any of the directions, where things were going, policies, procedures that we might be having to rewrite or come up upon. I always went to new employee orientation and just had, instead of me going on and on about the facility, I just let people ask me questions. There's always suggestions. If people want to be anonymous, we have a suggestion box. So just so people could feel like they were part of the institution. Now, for me, I was a warden of a women's institution, and the incarcerated population were very much a part of staff morale as well. And how I mean that is, if a staff member was having a bad day because of something that would happen, because with women, they're very in tune with, and not to say that men aren't, but women are very relational and they're very in tune with staff's feelings, and not in a negative or bad way. But if a staff member went back because they were not feeling good in terms of their morale, that would always fall down on the incarcerated people as well, the incarcerated women. So very quickly, the culture of your facility could go downhill. And unfortunately, that did happen. After I left my facility, I went back in, I was called to go back in and try to fix the things that went wrong. So it's very important to somehow have some systems that staff feel that they have input in what decisions you're making long-term. Now we're talking about strategic plan type decisions. Obviously, if something happens right then, a warden has to make a decision. Absolutely, we have to be right on the ball and be able to do that. But long-term strategic type planning, decision policy type decisions that we have latitude on, get their input.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to give you a very simple way of involving staff that doesn't take a lot of effort. And I learned this from one of my mentors who's now since passed. But when I was a correctional officer, some almost 47 years ago, I noticed that, and I didn't realize what he was doing until I was long since gone. He was all gone and I had moved on. But he took officers and put them on a policy review committee. And in the Bureau at that time, because we were all getting ready for ACA, every policy had to be reviewed once a year. Well, he had his secretary or his executive assistant, which ended up being me before long. And he had us send the officers and put the officers on a policy review committee for just one policy or two policies a year. And this goes all the way back to 1976. So when we're talking about the stuff we're doing now with all the empowerment and Gen Zs and all that, Steve Gregoric understood this way back then, that people needed to be involved. And he showed me in a very simple way that you didn't have to spend a whole lot of money. You didn't have to put on a committee, although we all got put on committees. Just give them something to do to make them part of the organization. And he really read all the policy recommendations that line staff made. So it's not a difficult thing to do. It's pretty easy to do. And you tell a young officer who's only been there 3 or 4 months, hey, I want you to look at this policy and tell me what we're doing wrong and what we're not doing wrong.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's great. I love the bringing up of the Gen Z and the millennials. I know that that's something that's come up a lot in conversation with the Great Wardens Project, is just sort of the generational differences and what, sort of younger staff, their expectations of what work is like and how that has, changed things. So I'm curious to know if others have thoughts on that as well. Is there anything else on this slide here that folks wanted to spend some time chatting about before we move on? Any other thoughts? No? All right. Regarding role ambiguity, I said we would spend some time with that. So this quote right here is from a Department of Justice Correctional Officer Wellness and Safety Literature Review, the link to which will be at the end of this slide. I'm going to launch a poll here for a second regarding this quote here. And I'm just curious whether or not you agree, disagree with this quote. The poll should have popped up on your screen, so I'll give folks a moment to respond to that. And I'm curious, once we're done here, what folks' thoughts are on this idea here about ambiguity or contradictory roles in corrections. I know you all can't see the results coming in. I'll post them in a second, but they're interesting. You've got some disagreements in the room. I love that. All right, I'll just give one more moment. Right. So folks should see the results here. It looks like most folks in the room agree that that's something that correction officers might face. We have some folks that disagreed though, and I don't want to, this is anonymous. I don't want to call anyone out, but if anyone who feels like they disagreed with this statement feels like they want to just hop on the mic and kind of share their thoughts, I would love to hear them. Same for others who agreed with this statement. How has that role ambiguity sort of shown up in staff morale and staff buy-in at your facilities?
Jessica, this is Jessica. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello, great name.
Yeah, every time they say it, I'm like, what? The kind of way I deal with this issue is I say we have two rules. Number one is know what the rules are, know what policy says. Number two, there's always an exception to policy. And you have to be able to know what policy is to know if you're going to deviate from it. And if you're going to deviate from it, you better be able to justify why you decided to do that. And if we do that, and people is what we're dealing with, they're not perfect cookie cutters. So you do have to make exceptions, and you have to know that. It's just like you can't treat all your children the same because they're all so stinking different. But that's how I work around things, that if a person's like, I can't follow the rules or I don't know what to do, I'm like, know the rule, then know there's an exception to every rule.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other thoughts?
Hey, Jess, Mel.
Yes.
I think it really matters also how well trained your staff are. Because if they aren't trained very well, there's going to be a ton of ambiguity. The more trained our staff are and the more informed they are, the more communication we have with our staff, the better off their role will be and the better off they're going to feel about their profession.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Jess, I'll throw something in. We're, most of you don't know about the HALT law that affects New York State, pretty much gets rid of keep locked and only limits us 15 days in SHU, but that's a whole other story. But to implement that in a correctional facility is not easy. And we're doing that right now. But the way I choose to do those things, when I have my meetings to steer this project, I bring everybody in. The officers that are the go-to people, special housing unit, are in my meeting all the way up the line to my first deputy superintendent, and I get a lot of input from the staff that's working those units, the sergeants and the officers that are working those units, and they are empowered. They know we care. I've actually changed some of my internal policies based on the input I got from those folks. So I think building teams inside your facility when you have different projects goes a long way to, building the level of professional responsibilities up in your staff. It also builds morale up because estate. It goes back to caring and not this whole you or we versus them, the administration versus us. They have to feel that we're all in this together. And it's all these little things, you know, are a culmination of the greater, which is leadership abilities. Do we think about how, I think Jessica was saying a little bit about that, Jessica Matthews, her and I are old partners of school. We go back about 10 years in our Great Warden. It wasn't a Great Warden school, was it, Jessica? It was new wardens and superintendents about 10 years ago out in Colorado. We were just private messaging. Been a long time, but we learn a lot as we go through, and we know what makes people tick. And certainly, it's good for us to really get the information from the staff that are working the unit. Even though we may have one idea, they have the ideas too, and it really makes for a much better, I think, holistic view at any time you're going to make a change. It brings all these other things to the table that build this whole level of confidence that staff have both in you and their jobs. And it's just, they feel, you know, as anybody would be, if you're involving me in something and I get to say something that makes an impact on what's happening, you know, there's a certain feeling that you walk away with. And I think that's something that we do as successful people and successful leaders.
Thank you so much. Any other thoughts, Lynn? I saw you unmuted yourself. I don't know if that was on purpose.
No, I was going to, add that I think all of our jobs and corrections can be ambiguous in the sense that I always felt as a warden, you would I did a lot of public speaking, and there would be folks in the audience that would say we're not doing enough. And then there would be other folks in the audience that would say we're doing too much. And so I felt like I was always trying to straddle that line. First, know your audience. Second is, try to keep it in the middle. And I think sometimes that ambiguity, especially with correction officer, leads them to isolation. And, they don't want to talk a lot to non-corrections folks about what they do, which I think is all the more important why folks, like the senior wardens we've heard from today, are out there talking to their people, letting them know that they care about them and that, their voice matters, because I think it's a very, very isolating career.
Yeah, I saw a lot of nodding heads when you said that. And that was, I think that's one of the things that this quote here is really getting at, is this idea of, are we punitive or are we rehabilitative? Are those opposites? Can they work together? When do you do one versus the other? And I think that, anytime you're working with people the way that you all are, corrections is a people profession. People are contradictory and ambiguous at times. And there is not always going to be that sort of black and white, here's the right or wrong answer. It requires, I think, a lot of judgment calls, which is what my namesake Jessica was also kind of referring to, I think, with the exception to the rule sometimes has to happen.
Jessica, one of the things I learned over many, many years is that you needed to meet with every new employee within the first week or so, if you could possibly do it. Didn't have to be a long conversation. That long conversation happened during a lecture I gave on code of conduct every time. But I would try to meet with every brand new employee, even for if it was just 5 or 6 or 7 minutes during that first week. And one of the things I wanted to do was say, hi, I'm Art Beeler. If you need to talk to me, don't be afraid to. I put my trousers on the same way you do. It's not all that crazy. I mean, I started where you started. I started as a correctional officer. Come see me, come talk to me. And, you have to watch the change. I mean, I would get comments from my AWs. Well, I'm in the chain of command. And I would simply say, if the officer feel like they have to come talk to me, I want them to be able to come talk to me. Now, often I would bounce them back to somebody else to talk to. but I wanted to have them have the ability to come talk to me. And, I think that's very important. We're reading a lot of literature these days on something called stay interviews instead of exit interviews. And that's the whole issue about stay interviews. It's not waiting until they get ready to go out the door. It's talking to them while they're there and saying, okay, what's going on?
I've never heard of that. I love that. Stay interviews. That's great.
Yeah, we have a thing that we call coffee with the LT. So you can have coffee offsite, on-site, and so it can be anonymous, however you want to do it. And it's anything you want to say or do or ask is free and open, and we'll try to do our best to answer it and fix it. And if we can't, we'll try to explain why we can't.
I love that. Yeah, just kind of taking that time, which I know is a finite resource, but I hear over and over from our task force members how important that is. Sorry, Mr. Capper, go for it.
No, I was just going to offer, we've heard different things from different folks today, but it's in New York, it's our policy. So it may be an idea to grab like what Art was saying. So every single new person that works for me has to see me. Everyone, the cook, the officers, whomever comes into this facility, it is New York State's policy, and it's called orientation, part of our orientation. So you will see every executive team member, you will see the superintendent, and you have, like Art says, you don't have hours, you have minutes, but it gives you that opportunity. And one of the things I do say to everyone, listen, if something's going on out there and you have your back against the wall and you just don't know where to go, you better get up here and get in my office. I have an open door policy. I need, when it gets to that point, we're all busy, like Art said, half the time you're turning people around, but they know that if it's really that important, you're going to leave them out there like that and leave that option out there. It makes a big difference, but it is a policy. So those of you who are in different states, it may be an idea. It does make a difference. You get to put eyes on because we're all busy. And if we don't make it our policy, we probably wouldn't know who's even, half the people in our facilities, especially those of us who've been in the same facility for a long time. You got a bunch of new employees, unless you're out there, locking into all these different areas, you may not even know who they are. So it's an idea for policy thought.
That's great. Thank you. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, I also think of functioning correctional officer rep committee, and I use functioning, not just to have it, but to have every shift in your facility to have an elected correctional officer to sit on a panel that meets with the executive staff once a month. And these are people that shift elected to go and take their concerns to the executive board to get feedback and to bring it back. And also with that core group, you can also use them to head projects or give you some insight on how you want projects to go. If you have a big project going on staff morale, employee appreciation coming up, and they're tired of the pizza parties and the breakfasts, then you ask them, what would you like to see? What would you want more of? And when they start to see their comments coming to pass, then they become more active and they feel like they're more empowered and they're part of the decision making. So functioning correctional officer representative committee, not just having this and feeling like, they're just there because policy says they're there, yeah. But utilize them to be leaders and give them something to look forward to.
I love that. That's great. Thank you. So one of the things that I think is, we talked a little bit about it earlier, the idea of having sort of a singular vision, right? Like the purpose for doing the work, such as to reduce recidivism, right? And I think that something like that could really help with this ambiguity or contradictory nature of the work. This slide probably looks familiar to those of you who joined us in our last summit, but I do want to return to it just as a way to provide some thought questions to address that role ambiguity, right? So if everyone sort of knows that they're coming to work for this one vision, that, you know, that there's a mission, there's a vision, that we all sort of believe in something, we all share a common understanding of what's important, we all share a common understanding of what success looks like, whether that's reducing recidivism, or whether that's, you know, having, you know, less mental health crises in the facility, or whatever it might be. That might help to sort of alleviate some of that role ambiguity and the contradictory nature of the work, because you realize everyone's sort of working towards a common goal. All right, this is another one that I've been looking forward to discussing. This is a quote from an article in The Guardian about PTSD among officers. I'm going to put up a poll here. I'm curious to know what folks' thoughts are about this. And this was a former corrections officer who said, corrections wisdom dictates that you deal with trauma by not dealing with it at all. And I'm curious to know what folks think about that. And I'm seeing the results come in. We've got disagreements again.
Jessica, I had
Yes.
a boss that was always telling me how busy he was, how too busy he was. And I said, you know, God's going to help you with that sooner or later. He's going to make you not so busy.
Sorry.
And it did. He got into a
Oh,
car
goodness.
accident racing from one spot to the next and
Oh, no.
hit a moose. And so
Oh, my
when,
gosh.
which is a huge problem here. But when that happened, he was laid up and he had to slow down and he had to reassess things, but he was always just running and not dealing with stuff. And I said, God's going to help you with that sooner or later. And it did.
Wow. And I'm kind of taken back. We've got really just disagreement across the board, which is really interesting. I'm wondering if folks have would like to share sort of their thinking behind whether they agreed or disagreed with this statement, and maybe how you've seen this play out in your facilities. Any thoughts?
Yes, I strongly disagree. In the past, that was the mantra. We kept things to ourselves inside. But as we realize with staff burnout and trauma, it takes 3 years for a person to get over a traumatic experience. Studies have proven. And what we have done now, we have EAP, which is a program that helps employees in need, but we've gone a step further with integrated behavior services. And it's just for staff, and it's confidential unless they're suicidal or a danger to the state. But they come out and they get the trust of the staff. They don't talk to me. They talk to integrated. And Kim Morse is one of our therapists. And I have a couple of staff in therapy with her. But we can't ignore this today like we did in the past. And we got to change the culture. So I strongly disagree at this point. But in the past, this was the mantra. But if we got to deal with the trauma, because traumatic experiences happen every day in a prison. And so I strongly disagree now, but that was what I had to follow when I was younger in corrections.
Yeah, I think I've heard a lot of similar sentiments from folks. Lynn?
Yeah, I also strongly disagreed, and I agree with Art. I think when I started in the early 80s, didn't ever use the word trauma. But I think as we approached the 2000s, I mean, it was a huge buzzword. And I guess what I was taken aback by when we went to implement a trauma-informed environment for the inmate population, as we were doing the training for the staff, there were so many staff that had been, bitten by trauma in their life, whether they were veterans returning from service or, folks that were in domestic violence type relationships. And we had a couple of staff actually break down during training. So,
Wow.
I think, it really became the forefront of our treatment of both staff and the inmate population.
Yeah, absolutely. I see a thumbs up from Dawn. Yeah, I think, trauma is, it's like laughter, right? It's like a universal sort of human experience, unfortunately, for a lot of folks. And I see a thumbs up from Jessica as well. Any other thoughts or ideas around really addressing trauma among correction staff? And again, this isn't about solutions necessarily, although I'm sure some folks have plenty of thoughts. But yeah, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, it's just a quick thought and a couple things about trauma. Way back when I was an officer at Attica, I remember my dad passed, and I was shocked when the warden showed up at the funeral home.
Wow.
I was an officer, and what the heck, the warden? I couldn't even believe it. I mean, he owned me then. I mean, there wasn't anything I couldn't do for him. I was so impressed he took that time to do that.
Wow.
What I did in my facilities is I told my deputy superintendent, I said, I want to know, we need to know when something terrible happens or something really good happens.
Mm-hmm.
If something really terrible happens in a person's family, we need to look after them. Emberly was talking about that a little bit, and so was Mike. You know what? I can't tell you how many hospitals I went to see a staff member that was there or his immediate family, or how many times we attended a funeral. Or on the other side, the other part of it is something really good happened. Somebody graduated from college, or somebody made the Air Force Academy, or something significant in staff's lives. Whatever kind of trauma or whatever kind of good or bad is, we always try to make sure we knew about that. And I would get mad if I didn't know about something happened. I said, our staff, they need to know that we care about them. And if something significant happens, bad or good, we need to take a look at it and talk to them about it. They might need some time off. They may need to talk to somebody, like Emberly says. We need to know about it. And the only way we know these things happen is by having good communication with our staff.
Right.
When we make quality rounds, it's not to fix things, it's to look at things and talk to staff. We hire our supervisor, department heads to go out and take care of business. But we need to go out there and take care of our staff. Sit down, have a cup of coffee with them. Hey, what's going on? Hey, I heard your son got himself in a little trouble with a motorcycle. How's he doing? I heard your wife just got accepted into college, and whatever that means over a cup of coffee and when we make our rounds. When we get back into our office, we can talk to our management team about, hey, I saw this going on. What the heck is that? But we're all making rounds. We're not out there to get the whip out or get the fix it or the wrenches out. We're out there to simply talk to people. And when staff experiences trauma, we need to know about it. We need to know about it and address it.
Thank you.
Jessica,
Yes.
I'd like to touch on what Mr. Williams said.
Mm-hmm.
My associate's mother passed away Monday. The
Sorry.
entire prison family is feeding the family today at their home. And me and my wife stayed up, made homemade lasagna and deviled eggs, and we're attending the funeral Friday. But just like Mr. Williams said, when I say we're a true family and one of us are hurting, we're all hurting. And he cried on my shoulder and we prayed together. And his mother's up there in heaven right now dancing with Jesus. But he knows we love him. And we are feeding the whole family today. They're coming in from all over the states. But that's how, just like Mr. Williams said, same thing I do and I believe in. When I make my rounds, I'm not there to get on nobody. One of the officers told me yesterday when I come in late, made my rounds, Mr. Morton, my 14-year-old son hit a home run. I said, praise God. I said, I just love to hear. It ain't all about business. It's showing you people you care for them, you love them, you appreciate them, and the spirit just is contagious. We have to hold staff accountable. I mean, I gave a written warning 2 weeks ago to an employee, and I told him I still love you. You messed up, but it's not the end of the world. I'm gonna make you the sharpest tool in my toolbox. And we went out of there shaking hands, and I said, I'm not gonna think nothing different. That means a lot. You got the whole staff accountable. But like Mr. Williams and the other ones, Capper said, you got to manage with the heart, not just the mind. And to touch on what Mr. Williams said earlier, we have to make decisions. We have to own that decision. We can't call our leadership to say, what do we do? Because I don't do that. I own my decisions. I tell them what I did. And that means a lot to your staff, knowing that you're making decisions and incorporating everybody. So, but trauma with people former military, we're hiring more military to spend in the military, and they're trained to hold that. Suicides, I mean, so I'm real big on integrated behavior specialists. I invite them to our meetings, get them to know them. I step out of the office. I have a woman's coordinator for my female employees because sometimes they're not comfortable talking to a man. And stuff like that. It just means a lot to staff when you show them you care. And I think everybody on this board cares for their staff. Even the retired ones cared for their staff. And I guess that's what we're here for today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. I think that kind of that goes back to what you're saying too about, you know, you're managing people, not tools. And yeah, absolutely. Mr. Kaplan.
Yeah, I agree with both Maria and Mel and probably everybody that's on here. But I don't think back in the day when I first started, somebody mentioned, I don't know if it was Lisa, back in the 80s, you know, we were, I know at least I was kind of brought up, so to speak, by Vietnam vets working in the facility. And yeah, we didn't deal with trauma whatsoever. It wasn't a thing. I think we're very acutely aware of what happens down back. It's very stressful. I mean, yesterday I had a sergeant just got jumped by 2 inmates, and he just walked in the door before I started this meeting here. He was going to drop off some paperwork, so I grabbed him and pulled him in for a minute. And you know, those are the moments that he knew I know who the guy is. He knows who I am, but that was a very traumatic experience. He dealt with it fine. He is fine. But letting him know we care means a lot to him. I do have a soft spot for my female officers. I have over 200 female officers in this place. Most of the incarcerated people are in here for a very violent crime in my facility. I have a large number of mentally ill people in my facility. So my officers are going from, some really, wild stuff, just getting through the day and going home to be mommies and wives and whatever else, daughters. It's not that, I'm just saying that I've had scenarios where I've made a recommendation that I think you guys should have maybe a sip and paint, either with or without a glass of wine. It's up to them, but a separate, so you can all kind of talk together. We've come up with those recommendations. I think they're smart to do. I don't want to exclude the guys either. I think it's important that we find and we explore ways in today's world that really gets people talking about, tense experiences together. And it does bring a lot of healing and a lot of acknowledgement that this isn't a bad thing. I mean, suicide rates are through the roof with law enforcement people, especially with corrections, at least out in the world. And I was a police officer, and believe it or not, I was a commissioner of police for many years. And while I was doing this job, I know that's kind of nutty, but it's a side story of my success for my marriage. But anyway, that's a side story. But the point of it is that as a cop on the street, you get a little something on your lapel over your badge that says you did something extraordinary. And a lot of corrections industries, we don't have that. And if you do get an award, it's not hanging on your uniform. So you're even less of being rewarded for some of the most heroic things I've seen in the 40-something years that I've been doing this. So all these things matter. We've got to be aware of the kind of stress that people are under when they're working inside this environment. And it's like working like a street cop in the middle of New York City. It's a tough place to work. And throughout the country, and all the people that are on this right now, it's a difficult place. We need to acknowledge it, and we need to. I think the healthy place is to let people get to a safe place so they can talk with their peers and get this stuff out. It works, and if you could throw a trusted psychologist in there that let them really, kind of navigate through, kind of like Jessica's navigating us through in that space, boy, that's a home run. That's all I have on that. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. I think this slide is showing what I am assuming you all know in your hearts already to be true, and probably have already seen numbers like this. And I firmly do not believe that this is inevitable. I don't think this has to be this way. But I do think, as some folks have mentioned, that it does require some really heavy culture change in order to address these things and to make it okay and normal to talk about these things. And that, and that it's, in my mind, so essential that talking about trauma, depression, PTSD, all this stuff is not seen as a weakness, nor is it seen as a vulnerability. I think if we frame it as a sign of strength that someone can talk about these things, I think that really helps to address them and to help start sort of that healing. I mean, I think ignoring it is certainly not helping. I think that we know that you all know that to be true. Art,
Jessica,
yes,
yeah,
go for it.
I just wanted to make a comment.
Mhm.
Where we started getting to be understanding of this is when we started bringing women inside the institution.
Hmm.
I was a kid, and when I started in the Bureau of Prisons, women were not allowed behind the gate. And I guarantee you there's some old guys on this telephone call that will tell you that women weren't behind the gate. I learned very early on that having women inside the institution that had a relationship, and not that they had inappropriate relationships, don't get me started on that one, but they had a bent toward having relationships that were positive. And because they had relationships which were positive, it rubbed off on us guys. And I think that's one of the reasons we understand this today. When I started in this business, which does go back a few years, you just sucked it up and kept it in. And that is not a good thing. That is a horrible thing. And we need to talk about it, and we need to encourage our staff to talk about it. And the only way you can see that is if you know your staff.
Yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts or ideas around this? All right. I think this is our last of our polls here, which I think is very much connected to everything that we've been talking about. This is a quote that comes from a officer health and wellness survey, the link to which will be available if folks want to take a look at it. One of the quotes from this survey is, generally speaking, correctional officers do not think they are making a positive difference. I'm going to launch a poll here for you all to either agree or disagree. Take a moment, let us know what you think. It's looking like we've got some agreement on this one as opposed to some of the other ones that we've discussed. I'll give just a moment. We've got mostly agreement on this one. And I think that kind of brings us to really the apex of the conversation here, which is how, especially for those of you that agree with that sentiment that a lot of officers feel that way. How do you combat that? How do you show officers that they're making a positive difference? What are some of the ways that you all are encouraging that among your other leaders too, the leaders that you have in your facilities? How are you doing that? Oh, Embry, you're muted.
I can tell you from when I was a correctional officer, I felt the same way. I'd walk into a facility, I go to my post, I saw the cliques, the white shirts over there, saw the sergeants over there once in a while, and then I was alone with the offenders. And you get caught up in that wheel and that cog in the wheel. But as time developed, I become a supervisor, become more involved. And I was actually held down in that cultural change we're talking about today, where you don't say anything negative because you don't want to get blacklisted. But now I'm in a role to make a difference. And how I do my correctional officers, other than they know I love them and appreciate them, they're part of the process. They come to, I have an open door policy too. They come to me with ideas and I say, that's a great idea. Let's talk about it. and letting it, and they're just part of the process and they're making a difference. They'll tell me real quick, that ain't gonna work because you're gonna interrupt feeding or interrupt this. I said, all right, how can we do it? Because the leadership wants to implement. We get together as a team, but changing the culture of where we come from is what we have to do to be successful today. So we can change that mindset, because some of us old heads, that's the way we were trained. You showed up where you better keep your mouth shut and do what you're told, or get on the train or get off. I've heard that. I hate that term, but I've heard that plenty of times. But that's how you make people a difference and show them that they're part of the process, showing them love, showing them appreciation, like all these great people on this call today, inviting them to the meetings, getting their input, that functional correctional team. I love that. We're doing an initiative right now in the state of North Carolina called All In, where we're trying to fight the retention problem to keep people. We're doing a lot on the front end of hiring them, but we got to retain them. And we lost 600 employees last month, turnover rate. Through, of course, we got 21,000 something people, but we got to change the culture. So I was one of them ones that didn't think I made a difference. Now I'm on this call with y'all because I think I'm making a difference. And we got to put that in the staff's mindset.
Thank you. Thank you. Mel, go for it.
Jessica, this sounds crazy.
Oh.
But one of the ways to tell them to make a difference is to tell them they make a difference.
What a wild idea.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I had an officer say, I'm just an officer. Whenever I heard I'm just, I stopped. And I said, no, you're not just you're a very important part of this organization and you have lots to contribute. So please don't tell me you're just and I would do that every time I heard that comment, simply because it's true. They're not just and you know, you have to tell them and you have to make them feel wanted. And sometimes you just have to say you are making a positive difference. You know, lots of people tell us all the time that we're not making a positive difference. We're just here either on one side of the fence, meaning we give them too much, or on the other side of the fence, meaning that we don't do enough, whatever enough is. And what I always tell them is, you be the best officer you can be, holding down the rules and regulations of the organization and making sure that you demonstrate that you care. You do that, you're not just us.
I love that. Yeah, thank you. Mel.
Hey, Jess, one of the tools I used to show they made a difference was through ACA accreditation. Our accreditation teams were out through the whole facility, involved all levels of staff, and they met on a monthly basis. And frontline staff would see they made a real impact when they brought up significant things going on with their accreditation review. You know, they'd be looking at their areas and they'd be giving input to the committee on what's going on in their areas, how they can meet a standard or the difficulty of meeting a standard. You know, they were involved in what was going on in the facility and they could see the end result, which in 3 years later was our ACA accreditation. And then we made a really big deal out of that. A second very smaller reason is when years ago when we used to go out recruitment drives, we send staff out recruiting drives, go to high schools, colleges, the county fair, and they had real impact with the community. You know, we put our officers out there, they competed to see who'd be able to go. They look good, they talk good, and they were able to have an impact. So, you know, it's a couple things. One, they can impact inside the facility through the process, and two, impact with the community. Both those work really well for staff.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Any other
Jessica?
thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's Dawn.
Hi, Dawn.
I definitely agree with Mel, and I think that we're really seeing a thread here that we can make a difference with staff through communication. And there's many different ways that we've discussed so far that we can communicate, whether we're having them come up to us or whether we're going out to them, whether it's off site or on site. There's so many different ways to show the staff that we care about them, the little things that happen in their lives, as we've discussed. And I think that it's important for us to also say that each individual correctional officer isn't just, like Art said, but a leader. They are a leader. They can be leaders to other staff, and there's certainly models to the incarcerated people. And it's very important from my viewpoint that if we can get them to see that every time they get that incarcerated person to their appointment on time, or they know that they've gone to school and had a test and they say, hey, how'd that test go? Or whatever behavior that can show that incarcerated person the right way to do things, that they are being a leader to them and to other staff. So they're models. And I think that way, every staff member can feel very inclusive, and it can go a long way to helping with the isolation factor that can very easily happen, like we've discussed.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Jessica?
Yeah, there's two things that popped into my head. When I was a CO back in the 80s in Florida, I was 19 years old, and my lieutenant, a great mentor, told me, you're thinking like a CO. And I was like, well, I am a CO. That's what I am. And he's like, but that's what you're thinking like, think bigger. And I've never forgotten that. And because one, he was open to me thinking bigger and told me to think bigger, because prior to that, I just kind of did what I was supposed to do, which is, you know, back in the 80s, all these stereotypes of just suck it up was the thing. But after that, I looked around and saw potential and options and put in suggestions. So that changed my whole focus. And then recently here in Alaska, we did sergeant interviews, and one of the questions was, you know, how do you help with public safety? And I was really surprised, got great answers, but none of them had anything to do with public safety in the community of taking people off the street and just having that time out. If nothing else, we are taking care of people that need a timeout in society because they misbehave. And people just didn't even think about it. They had plenty of good answers, but that was, you know, sometimes we forget the real purpose of why we're here is we're helping protect people. And that alone, the lack of a violent crime, the lack of someone getting hurt is a difference that we're making. You just can't track it as easily.
I think that the fact that you can't track it as easily, I'm sure that makes a huge difference. And as you know, I'm a victim advocate by trade, and so frequently, you know, I see people at their worst, very much like many corrections folks do, and then I talk with them, and then I have no idea how they fare afterwards, you know, and I wonder too if you know, the success stories of incarcerated people who, you know, leave your facilities and go on to do great things. I wonder to what extent sharing those stories with staff also help to show that not only are they making a positive difference in terms of public safety, but perhaps they're also making a positive difference in the lives of these people by being role models, by being mentors, you know, as Dawn described. And I imagine those stories can be really challenging to find, but when they are there, I have to believe that sharing those can also really help folks understand the difference that they're making. Mike?
Yeah, I just want to add quickly, because I think we'll have some stories, but also when it comes to staff, you know, we are brought up in the saying that we use in New York State is fair, firm, and consistent. That's what we want our recruits to remember. I think that goes way, way back. It was a great statement, and it's a good way of looking at things. We are evolving in our culture. We're certainly evolving in this business called correction and rehabilitation. And when you task, here's an example. one of your officers that's running the school, and you say, what do you got for a, what's the attendance like? And they give you the attendance number, where so once that becomes an issue for you, and that now becomes an issue for the officer, and then when that GED rolls around and X amount of the incarcerated get a GED, and then you recognize that officer for encouraging those incarcerated people to get to that GED class, for instance, or college class, because we have a lot of graduations here at Sing Sing, and we have some of the most famous people on the planet come here. A lot of stars, movie stars, come to Sing Sing to celebrate the successes of the inmate population here. But we make sure we bring the officers in on it. And what happens is, whether we have Usher or Whoopi Goldberg or Martin Sheen or whoever's in the audience or up front shaking hands with people, we mention the officer that has that unit, and what happens is all the incarcerated people start clapping like they do for the instructors or professors. So it's an idea, but I'd like to know if there's anybody else that has an idea like that. And we've made it a thing that, care about who comes down to your unit. Yeah, you have to be fair, firm, consistent. Yeah, you have to be watching out for the gangbangers and all the rest of the stuff that we watch out for. But to add that component, that officer does now feel that they're making a positive difference. So is there anybody else out there in this arena and any other like that could really make a difference for that person, and your staff?
I love that. Yeah, just by virtue of doing just their job, quote unquote, they've helped someone accomplish this really big thing. And I imagine that perspective is so easy to get lost in the day-to-day if it's not pointed out, like you mentioned.
The thing that Mike just mentioned, but I want to go back to something Mel said. Mel said he used ACA accreditation a lot. Well, or tours, or people coming to your institutions, or, I always let the officer lead the tour in their unit. And I said, this is your unit. Now, I regretted that once or twice, but it was only once or twice. And I let the officer give the tour of their unit. And most of the time it came off very well. And the officer knew that he had a responsibility, or she had a responsibility, for telling that person what they did. Now, I'm not like Michael. I mean, most of my places are out in the middle of nowhere. So I didn't have the luxury of having the stars come in, but it doesn't matter. Have a congressman come in, have a mayor come in, let the staff shine.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I want to get back really quickly to this idea, Art, that you first shared with us at a meeting some time ago about visibility versus presence. The idea that it's not enough to just be seen as a leader; that your presence has to be felt as a leader. And I wonder if I can ask you to just share a couple closing thoughts on that idea as we start to wrap up today's summit.
Sure. We learned to be management by walking around. And I used to call it management by wandering around. And that's okay. That's a good thing to do, but it doesn't do enough. You have to have presence with your staff. And this is where the work comes in. It's not easy, but you have to sit down. I mean, you have to sit down with staff and you have to say, hey, how did your son do in the ball game? That they played football or played basketball or whatever. How did they do in the ball game? Or that the spouse of a correctional officer is taking courses at college. And you say, okay, how are they doing? Do they need anything? Can we help them with anything? Those are issues of presence. The other thing about presence is, it goes back to when I was in a very short period of time in the Marine Corps, but they taught you command presence, and they taught you to come on and to show the people that you care. I mean, this is remarkable, but people don't believe it. But they showed you to say, you tell people that you care about them. And there's a book out there that I don't know if anybody's read, that Leaders Eat Last. That's presence. One of the things that you learned in platoon leader school is you ate last. You didn't go in the front of the line. You went at the back of the line. And the best leaders I've seen go to the back of the line and make sure everybody else gets taken care of first. That's presence. And that's presence that people know about. Glad handing is fine. Going out and shaking people's hands are fine. There's nothing wrong with it at all. But what really makes the difference is knowing your staff, connecting with your staff, and making sure that they understand you and take care of that. I hope I made some sense there.
Of course. Thank you so much. I do want to wrap things up. I can't believe we are at time. I wanted to have a lot of time at the end for conversation. I'm so glad that the conversation happened throughout. So we won't have time for that. I do want to highlight for those of you who are interested in signing up for our newsletter or for contacting us with any questions or suggestions. Our website is here. Our email is here. This little QR code will take you to sign up for our monthly newsletter. If you'd like to connect with us there. These slides will be made available, as well as a recording of this session will be made available on our website shortly. Also, save the date for our next leadership summit. The subject is to be determined. If you have any suggestions, please share them with us. This QR little code right here will take you to the page to sign up to register for that next leadership summit. And we will provide that via our newsletter and all that as well. These are the links to some of the articles and such that I referenced. Very interesting stuff. Again, it'll be on our website, so you can click on those links if you want to read more about some of the research that I did. When this meeting is over, an evaluation is going to pop up. It's really short, just a few questions. Any thoughts or suggestions, or feedback that you all have, we greatly appreciate it. I know your time is precious, so any moment that you have to do that would be great. I want to thank everyone so much for your participation. Thank you to Mr. Capra, Mr. Beeler, Mr. Morton, to everyone who participated and joined us today. And I hope to see you at our next summit. And again, reach out to us if you have any questions or suggestions or want to get more involved. We've got a LinkedIn page as well. If folks want to join the LinkedIn group, if you're active on that website. But again, thank you all so much for the work that you do and for joining us today. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.